Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Hope you're all having a great day. So today we are back on the Pioneer, getting it buttoned up and everything fixed from our last ride. So if you're not familiar, on the last ride I was up at Big Lake and a friend of mine flopped this over on its side and the steering wasn't quite right. It was a little crunchy, about this much play in the steering wheel before the tires moved, and then needed an alignment. So today we're going to go ahead and remedy that problem. I got the parts in. So let me show you where we're at. Right here on the workbench we have the new steering box and some seals for the differential. We have our owner's manual out, or the workshop manual out. If you own a quad, side-by-side, UTV, something like that, and you like to work on it yourself, I recommend getting one of these things. I mean, this is like $70 for the paper version. I have a digital version, and then when I go into working on something on the Pioneer, this is only the parts that I need or have used up to this point. There is probably another 6 or 7 chapters left. So on the Pioneer, I already have the wheels off, I have it jacked up and on jack stands. Removing the steering box and these things looks like it's pretty easy according to the service manual. One thing you do need to realize is if you do this, the bolts on here are supposed to be replaced. There are 4 bolts on the steering box, 2 on this side and 2 on that side. And then you have the bolt that goes into the steering shaft right here. First thing we're going to do to get the steering box out is we're going to remove the tie rods. Now mine's a little different than if you're running a stock machine, but it's same principle. My tie rods have an inner and outer adjustment, or if you have a stock machine, you only have an outer adjustment. So the easiest thing to do is just unscrew it from the outer tie rod. What we're going to end up doing is leaving that inner tie rod there, so when I pull the steering box out, I can remove the inner ones from the old box to the new box. On the Super ATV tie rods, you're supposed to blue Loctite the inner ones in, so it'll be much easier on the bench. I've already gone ahead and loosened the jam nuts, so I can just unscrew this by hand. So once you get your tie rods off, the next thing you need to do is loosen the steering shaft. And let me show you what that is. The next thing I want to do is remove this bolt right here on the steering shaft. It is a 10 millimeter. Another bolt here, you can remove that. This is also a 10 millimeter on the spline shaft. So once I get this bolt removed, I'll have the 4 bolts on the steering box. I went ahead and I removed that top bolt. Let me show you what it looks like. You do need to pull it all the way out because there is a groove in the steering shaft. The bolt I just removed goes out of the collar here, and it goes right here in this groove, so you will not be able to slide it off unless you remove the whole bolt. Now the next part of this job is a 2-person job to get the 4 bolts out of the steering box. There's an access panel inside your Pioneer on the floorboard, and you've seen me use this access panel before to route some wiring. It's 2 5mm hex heads. Pull off this panel. So on the steering box, the 2 upper bolts you're going to get to by that access panel. It's really tight. It's good if you have a kid to go in there and just hold the wrench and you can ratchet it from the outside. The bottom bolts, let me show you what I'm using. So this is what I have. I have a breaker bar with a 10-inch extension, a swivel, and then the socket. Both the nut and the bolts are 14 millimeters. And what I'm doing is I take this tool and I'm going up right through here, and you can access the bottom bolt. Just lay on your back, get up here to hold it, so you can go ahead and pull the bolts out. I'm gonna go ahead, remove the other 3 bolts, and then we'll pull this thing out through the driver's side and put it on the workbench and transfer over the tie rod ends. I don't know how well the camera's gonna show this, but right there is the top bolts on the driver's side. So that's why you're gonna use this panel. I'll have a helper stick this in there and hold it while I ratchet from the outside. So in order to get the steering box out, there's 2 10 millimeter bolts on this differential cover here you need to remove. And then there is a 12 millimeter on this bracket that bolts up right there. And this is your front differential adjustment, in case you were ever wondering, right there. So if this bracket has not been removed, you will not be able to get the steering box out. So let's look at it. So here are my 2 steering boxes. Here's the new one and here's the old one. So while this is on the bench, it's gonna be a lot easier to put the inner tie rods on here. If you watch the install of the portal lift, you'll know that Super ATV requires you to put blue Loctite on your inner tie rods. So it's gonna be a lot easier to do it here and then go ahead and zip tie the bellows onto the inner tie rod here. From there, it's just reverse. Now I am gonna take this apart, see what we broke, and see if we can rebuild this. All the parts are available on Rocky Mountain ATV. They are OEM Honda parts, but some of the pieces just currently aren't in stock, so I had to order the whole piece. I can say this is not a on-the-trail fix unless you got an hour or two. So let's go ahead, get these swapped over, and we'll get the reinstall going. So I've got the steering box put back together with the bellows on. So what I did is I took some old hose clamps I had laying around and I put them on the inside. The factory bellows or boots, whatever you want to call them, fit much better than the Super ATV ones. They're really large. I can never get the zip ties tight. And being that we have a new steering box here, I want to make sure we kept all contaminants, water, whatever out. I don't go through a lot of water, but just in case, we don't want to ruin the steering box because it is not the easiest thing to get in and out of your Pioneer. And for those who are wondering, here's your installation specs in case you wanted to pause the screen right now. But basically it's telling you to use 4 new bolts on those right there, and we're going to tighten it down to 29 foot-pounds. One other thing the instructions do say to do is the bolt that goes into the steering shaft right here, it says replace that also with a new bolt. And that is right here telling you it needs to be a new bolt. I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall this off camera just to make it a little bit easier and quicker for me. And then I'll come back and we are gonna go ahead and do an alignments. I used to use toe plates in the rear, but now that I have a portal lift, it's a little bit different. So I'll show you how to do that coming up next. Well, I got the steering box in, torqued down, and man, was that a pain. Really need 2 people, and it's kind of difficult to get in there, but I got it done. So one thing to remember when you're taking your steering box out is you kind of have to rotate it when you pull it out. Be very careful of your coolant lines to the radiator and the cable that goes to the front differential if you have a deluxe like myself where it's manually operated. So here's the old steering box. So when I took it out, I literally had to roll it forward and it goes out the driver's side and then put it back in. It's reverse. So the next thing I was getting ready to do is put the tie rods back on so that we can get it aligned and get this project done. But I still want to do some post-ride inspection because I hadn't taken anything apart. So I wanted to show you what else I found. So this is the driver's side portal, and I want to shake it. There is no movement. These ball joints are good, but that's not the case for the passenger side. So if you saw the video, the Pioneer flopped passenger side when just past 90 degrees, maybe 110, 120 degrees on the downslope. When we went to pull it up, we pulled it up about 2 or 3 feet. The X3 lost traction, went back down gently, and then we pulled it up again. So there was a lot of leverage on this portal right here. Part of it is because I'm running 35s, but even if I wasn't running 35s, that's a lot of stress on these little itty bitty ball joints. So I had a feeling they may have gotten damaged. I'm not too worried. They're 15 bucks a piece. I like the Honda OEM ones. I've tried some other brands. You know what? They didn't last. My stock A-arms, never had an issue with them. Then I put in an aftermarket one when I put the Super ATV arms on there, and I ended up replacing them. So I put the portals in. I made sure I had all Honda ball joints. Now the great thing with portals, it is so much easier to change a ball joint. I don't have to pull the axle. So if I come up to this portal here, I can, let's see if you can see it in the camera or you can hear it. I don't know if the camera's gonna hear that. There's movement right here. Let me see if the bottom one's moved too. Now you can really hear it. And the bottom one is moving. So the benefit of portals is I don't have to pull my axles, but we're gonna go ahead and change these ball joints out. I already have some new ones here. I always carry at least one set in my go bag with my toolkit. So I'll order another set, replace these. So basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna support the portal down here. We're gonna end up taking the shock off, and then we'll take off the top, press this one out, and we'll take off the bottom, press that one out. And I'll just move the portal out of the way. One thing you need to remember is you need to put the snap rings. The top isn't as crucial as it goes through, but the bottom down here, this ball joint presses up. So the only thing holding this ball joint in, other than the weight of your machine, is this little snap ring. And I've busted one of those before. So let's go ahead and get these ball joints removed, replaced, get this thing back together, aligned, so we can get out on the trails. First thing we'll do is get this portal supported. And I'm not jacking it up, I'm just holding it up. So now with the limit straps on these shocks, I do have to put a little bit of pressure in the bottom of this portal to get this limit strap off. And just like that. So next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cheat, and we're going to take the cotter pin off the back of this. The cotter pin's out, we're gonna go ahead and remove these two nuts here. The top is a 17 and then the bottom is a 19. And don't lose these, you're gonna reuse them once you bought new ones. Now the issue I'm gonna run into, as I don't know if the camera's showing, is this castle nut is gonna hit my axle unless I pop this down. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. We'll start with the top ball joint, super simple. It's the easiest of the two. And take the snap ring out like this, and you will reuse this if you don't break it. So keep that. All right, once you get the snap ring off, we'll get that cleaned up here in a minute. I'm just gonna put my press on here. Now my press is for heavy diesel, so I have to improvise a little bit, but that's okay. We'll see if the little impact gun has enough to do this. So here's the new top ball joint, and as you can see, it presses up. So we're gonna push this one down, which makes it a lot easier because I can literally just take this cup, get it on here, and then take this piece here and just push. Yeah, it's gonna ruin this ball joint, but we're replacing it because it's bad anyways, so I'm not too concerned. So now that they're out, I'm gonna clean those up and then we'll press the new ones in. So I cleaned everything up a little bit, brake clean. I took a Scotch-Brite and just cleaned it down. Now, you may be tempted to rattle can this. If you want to, go ahead. I won't until after I press everything in because I just don't want more interference. The more you press ball joints in and out, the more you can get wear and tear on here. I think this is my second set on the bottom and the third set on the top. So to press them in is a little bit different. You gotta be careful, you don't want to tear your boots. So this one is gonna press in. You wanna make sure it's nice and square. If you want, you can put some WD-40, something like that on there to help it a little bit. Since my ball joint press is for heavy diesels, I use a 1 3/16 socket to press it in. So I take this very carefully, it's a 1/2 inch drive, not to rip the boot, and it's sitting on the ring, so that when I go in, it'll get pressed in. So let's get that done. So one thing you want to remember when you're pressing it in, you want to make sure everything is square, so you don't go in on an angle, because you could ruin the A-arm. So as you can see, the top one is done. I just got to put the snap ring in. The boot's not torn. And so we'll go ahead and do the bottom one. The bottom ball joint slides in from the bottom. So that I don't damage it, I have a 36mm socket that will go right around the edge. You don't want to press on this part right here because that's where all the ball joint stuff happens. So it fits right around the edge, and we will press that in. So I got both ball joints in and both C-clips on, and let me show you. So there's my upper, there's my lower. One thing you gotta make sure is when you put these C-clips on, that it's actually in the groove, Like this one I had to tap just a little bit to get it to seat, and you could hear it snap in. But for those of you wondering, there is a part number for the C-clip for the bottom. Here's one of the other ball joints and the other ball joints. I don't have the part number for the top C-clip because I reused the old one and I didn't see one that was in the bag in there. So next thing we're gonna do is just reassemble quickly, and then we'll go ahead and get the tie rods on, get in alignment, and get done for the day. Once your castle nuts are on, don't forget to use new cotter pins. I don't like to use old cotter pins, I always like to use new ones. So what I do is I take a piece of scrap aluminum angle iron. I take some old lug nuts to space it out so I get past the brake caliper, and some old lug nuts here. I build a couple holes that are 1/2 inches. The studs are 12 millimeter, so 1/2 inch is 13 millimeter. That just barely fits over. And then I measure it out. On this side I can't find my other piece of aluminum, but that's okay. As long as you go from the same distance from the inner and outer tape measures. If you'll look, I am at 64 5/8 or 7/16, and right here I'm at 64.5. So what that means is I'm about an 1/8 inch toed in. From here, I'll go ahead, I'll tighten up my jam nuts. Remember, one's a right hand thread, one's a left hand thread. After that, I'll put the wheels and tires back on. I'll torque everything down and get it off the jack stands. I'll take it for a test drive. I'll double check to make sure those jam nuts are nice and tight. From there, I'll recenter the steering wheel. It'll probably need to be moved, anywhere from 3 to 5 degrees right or left. I made sure, and you need to make sure if you're going to replace your steering box, that once you do it, you center the steering box before you put your tie rods on. That way, you'll have exactly the same amount of right hand and left hand turns. I think it's 2.5 turns from lock to lock. So I hope you enjoyed the video. We did a lot today. We replaced 2 ball joints, replaced the steering box, and we did an alignment. So don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and until next time.